Hey everyone, welcome back to Weekends with Anna and Michael. I gotta say, having Waz on the show was a blast. I think he's so great and his opinions are awesome. His analysis is awesome. I'm really glad we had him on. But we're gonna switch gears a little bit and talk about issues that aren't related to, well, somewhat related to the protests that are taking place. But, we can't keep our eye off the ball when it comes to what the vast majority of Americans need in this country, and that is a single-payer healthcare system. And so I'm going to toss to you, Michael, because that's what your commentary is about today.
Yeah, absolutely. So I just want to take a couple of minutes to say that we need to keep really focused on two core policies and not let them fall into the background with, the defeat of Bernie Sanders, who courageously and correctly pioneered single-payer universal healthcare, Medicare for all, giving every single human being in this country full and complete healthcare coverage. How many lives have been lost because we don't have universal healthcare? How many lives are going to be accelerated in their losses during a pandemic because we have not done what every other industrialized democracy has done? And while achieving the goal of single-payer healthcare is in fact not at all radical and not at all out of step with just building a basic modern society, in America it is radical, because we do know that some of the most powerful interests in this country, not just, of course, the parasite industries, the HMOs, the insurance companies, the industries that profit off of premature death, lack of health in this country, and being parasitic intermediaries between you and your healthcare, but also more broadly. We know that several years ago, when it was a popular wonky argument to say, look, it's in the company's interest, it's in GM or Ford's self-interest to have universal healthcare so that they don't have to provide healthcare for their employees. Well, we actually see very clearly that they want the political ability, the coercive ability to take away people's healthcare if, as an example, they go on strike for better conditions. It's a political play. There's enormous political power in not having the baseline of every single human being having healthcare. Fortunately, it's still on the table. I want to put up graphic one, which is basically just that a report has just been issued in the state of New Mexico, which we can get into at another time. But that state legislature and their Democratic leadership is in fact looking at potentially piloting a state program for single-payer healthcare. This is a urgent justice, basic humanity, as well as pro-labor step. Because as I said before, if you don't have healthcare to threaten people with, they are more free to do things like organize labor unions and demand better conditions. The other big step that we cannot step away from and we need to keep at the front of the agenda is a federal jobs guarantee. Federal jobs guarantee, again, first major impact, huge step forward for organized labor. If there is a federal job competition and you know that if you are able and want to work, you've got it. Again, that will incentivize you to organize and demand better conditions and not submit to the hyper exploitation of the temp economy, the service economy, or the eroding what's little left of the factory and industrial economy. I want to quote actually briefly from Robert Reich, and we'll put this up on screen, from a piece that he wrote for the Sanders Institute in 2018, because this summarizes a lot of this really well. At the same time, a lot of work needs to be done. Greening our nation's infrastructure, caring for the elderly, teaching in our public schools, adequately staffing national parks, you name it. So why wouldn't the federal government create jobs and connect them directly to people who can't otherwise find one with decent, predictable hours and a living wage? An added plus, the availability of such jobs would give more bargaining power to many low-wage workers to get better hours and wages, because if they don't get them from their employee, they have an option of a public job. This way, the federal job guarantee would raise the floor for job quality nationwide. I love these two programs because they both, of course, will enormously relieve suffering in this country and help the vast majority of people. But they also are tips of the spear, so to speak, for a strategic realignment towards the capacity for working people to organize themselves, which is absolutely essential, without which we can't have a hope for broader economic justice, and our democracy itself is completely eroded by. So keep those two, single payer universal healthcare, federal jobs guarantee, at the forefront of your policy demands.
You know, this discussion goes back to something that you bring up in other contexts, Michael, which is, challenging the power structure. And I have to be honest, I hadn't thought about why employers want to maintain the healthcare system that we have now. And it really is to have leverage over workers. I mean, not only would you fear losing your job, you could lose your healthcare benefits along with it if you're caught organizing, and it's a disaster. And we did see that with the GM protesters who decided to organize. They lost their healthcare benefits, and that's devastating, especially on the heels of a pandemic, right? No, Absolutely. It was right before the pandemic. Yeah. So it's such a great point. And also keep in mind that like the messaging regarding the freedom of choice is just complete and utter BS, right? Because it's not choice. You are forced to take what your employer is willing to give you. And many employers offer healthcare benefits that aren't very great. Like they're just not robust. I'll give you a specific example. Family member of mine has wife and 2 kids. They spend $1,600 a month on healthcare, and it just blows my mind. And he's employed. He has his healthcare through his employer. So that's his monthly premium. And I don't even know what the deductible is. So we do need to change this system.
Outrageous. I like those two policies so much because they really, in addition to solving immediate problems like people not having health insurance, which should be obvious, I like that they open the door of clawing power back for people a little bit.